for a Vox Sports Update. Dreadzone's Extermination of the Day award goes to Shellshock for his 360 Tomahawk finishing move on Plutonium Jones.
It was a beauty, Dallas, and it marks Shellshock's third extermination of the season.
Fourth, actually. The Omega Twins count as 2.
Good points. And we're now live with Shellshock for comments. Shellshock?
Ha ha ha! Those Omega Twins went down like wee little curly men. Ha ha ha!
Yes, quite ironic, especially since they were actually teenage girls.
Yeah, ironic. Hey, Juanita, are you wearing Ace Hardlight underwear?
And now for a heartwarming story in entertainment news. Courtney Gears has made a remarkable recovery after a near-death experience last year when she was attacked by 2 psychotic fans.
Ah, poor girl. You know, you just hate to see that kind of senseless violence.
It's appalling, Dallas. I'd just like to take those 2 creeps and...
I'm sure we all would, Juanita. And you may just get your wish, because those very evildoers are about to come face to face with the mighty Shellshock. Catch it all live on Dreadzone.
Greetings, I'm Solidus-Skully, and welcome back to Ratchet Deadlocked, where, well, we're not quite heading back to Planet Kronos. Well, back? We haven't even been there before. So no, we're not heading to Kronos just yet, because we're returning back to the Dreadzone hub, base, pre-programmed shuttle flight, where we're pretty much going to pick up a few upgrades, talk about our day, and say hi to Clank, because I bet he's feeling lonely. But yeah, that little thing in the center over there, use that to check your ranking. And as Big Al mentioned earlier, go off towards this little shop thing here, and you can basically get upgrades from Merc and Green. In this case, the shield link, which is actually quite useful, because again, if you're turning bolt cranks yourself, they'll put a shield over you. Or in turn, if you're having Merc or Green use a specific action, then whatever robot has their hands free, excuse me, they'll pretty much use that to put a shield around whatever action they're doing. Like, again, if you get one of them to turn a bolt crank, they'll put a shield around them. If they're using, like, the grind rail cable thing, they'll put a shield around them. Bada bing, they do the thing, and, yeah, provided one of these 2 robots stay alive, that shield is invincible! But anyway, let's, see... Oh, well, nothing worth buying, I suppose. So, let's move on to the alien spaceship. Yep, that's it. Ratchet was abducted by aliens. The end. Even though he is an alien. Yeah, but yeah, again, I gotta say, like, I've talked about this time and time again, but again, I can't get enough about the use of bloom effects, which, more than any other era of gaming, just feels like a very 2005 kind of thing. I mean, Ratchet and Clank 3 had a bit of this as well, but I don't know, I consider 2005 the bloom year of video games. And again, it's quite an appealing look. I mean, it's not quite oversaturated, but I don't know. It's a pretty light, and therefore I like it. But anyway, here's the preview.
Folks, we're live tonight from the planet of Kronos, where Commander Shellshock and his army have taken over the city and don't like visitors. Ratchet will fight to keep Team Darkstar alive, while Clink tries not to get him lost. What? Clink? Clank? Oh, Clank, that's what I said. Well, you know, it doesn't matter, because Team Darkstar is about to become Team Deadstar. Oh, will they survive long enough to enter the foreboding Dark Cathedral? If so, Shellshock will be there to finish them off for good. Place your bets, everybody, because we're going straight to the action.
So, this is Planet Kronos, and a rather beautiful looking city. Like, it's... I don't know what it is, it's like a really gothic, futuristic kind of look to it, and, man, I can't really help but dig it, man. Like, I mean, it's really saying something when your game can make, you know, the color scheme of black and grey look vibrant and interesting to look at, and my god, this level is just cool as hell. Although it is, something of a bit of a caveat to me, actually, because, again, I don't know if it's my PS2 copy of the game, but... And I think this seems to be a case with some versions of Ratchet Deadlocked in and of itself, but... Yeah, I noticed this part of the game tends to be a little bit buggy depending on what copies you have, because, yeah, sometimes the music won't play correctly, certain voice samples will cut off, and, I don't know. It's, can be a little bit pish, but, I don't know. At the same time, it shouldn't be too bad, so, yeah. Onto the level itself, actually. Kronos is very much just structured in the way that you're, making your way towards your first Exterminator battle with Shellshock. And again, much in the same vein as Serathos with Leviathan, it does kind of build up to the challenge quite nicely. I don't know, like, I mean, again, it's got a very foreboding atmosphere about it, and again, it's a level that seems a little bit more befitting of, well, something I kind of wish wasn't really that much of a joke boss, and Shellshock being the, you know, this, oh yeah, I'm an Arnold Schwarzenegger dumbass. I mean, again, I do know why they made Shellshock, you know, a bit of a jokey sort of villain, since again, he is meant to be, for all intents and purposes, a warbot who had his brain replaced by a coffee machine, and he is meant to be this sort of goofy, wacky jokester, I will kill you all with one-liners. And I mean, it's okay, but at the same time, it is also just a little bit, you know, could have used a more interesting thing to talk about. I don't know. I mean, the Exterminators I find to be very hit or miss. Like, I mean, again, if they're not treating them as jokes akin to Shellshock or a reactor to some small extent, they're either people who have no personalities whatsoever, like in the case of the Eviscerator, or characters that they could do something with, like Ace Hardlight, but rarely ever seem to follow up on, because... And again, I don't know if Ace Hardlight's backstory is expanded upon in the game itself, or if it was just something in the manual or strategy guides or whatever, but... Yeah, Ace Hardlight does in fact have a backstory where they do delve into his heroism. It's just never really seen in the game, which is incredibly disappointing. It's, I don't know really, like, I mean, it's not quite to the same extent of, you know, containing plot essential information, you know, kind of like how Dante met Virgil in Devil May Cry 3 in the prequel manga, but at the same time though, it's just, this backstory could have gone a long way into enriching the story, and, well, it doesn't really, which does actually bring me to a bit of trivia that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, at least regarding the story. I mean, the story is, once again, written by Brad Santos, who, again, wrote the plot of Ratchet & Clank 3, and again, I think he does a remarkable job here as well, but at the same time, you can tell, much in the same vein as a lot of the game, really, there are a lot of cuts in the seams, and this story itself was different in earlier versions of the game, which, again, I suppose does make sense, as it would also countenance for, you know, Ratchet & Clank being involved in a racing plot as opposed to, you know, combat sport. But at the same time, the game was also heavily rewritten several times and not finished up until late in development. And to be completely honest, that sort of mentality does kind of show, because it seems to sort of eke out of the Sonic Heroes philosophy of, we've designed the levels first and foremost for multiplayer, now let's have a story written around that. And again, Deadlocked's framework does kind of make it work in a little bit better of a way than Sonic Heroes ever did, but at the same time it also feels like that these were pre-baked environments made specifically for gameplay, as opposed to, you know, having a story context completely written around it. By the way, that's also another example of the sound issues that we've been having, which is a shame because the level theme of Kronos is actually really fucking cool. But back to the story at hand, again, you can definitely feel that in some aspects, because again, like, I mean, especially as you'll see later on in the game, like, again, this Dread Zone is basically a combat sport meant to test heroes and, get Gleam and Vox the viewership and the money, and the lady with the Glaven, but at the same time we never really see that many heroes around. Which again, to me, I think is probably one of the biggest problems of the game, because again, heroes being involved in the combat sport, I feel could have been the most interesting part of the game. Again, you could have had heroes pitted against each other, and again, as Gleam and Vox, attempted Ace Hardlight and was very all about the money, and as he mentioned earlier, thought that Ratchet was a very similar character in nature to what Ace Hardlight was in his heroic youth. Again, like, I mean, you could have seen him maybe manipulating some heroes, so again, heroes that Ratchet and Clank would have first met, being on the straight and narrow and wanting to do heroic good, could have easily been corrupted in a similar vein to Ace Hardlight, and Ratchet and Clank are put in the uncomfortable position of, okay, we're either going to have to fight each other for their amusement, because again, if we don't, we get blown up, and if not, then Gleam and Vox will try and manipulate us. And again, I feel like that would have added some much-needed teeth to Deadlock's overall story structure, but I don't know whether it was out of fear of this game being a little bit too dark, or just, I don't know, Insomniac not really being interested. But it is a damn shame, because again, I feel like Deadlock's story does have a lot of potential to be really engaging and cool. It's just that they either fall back on old formulas, like a lot of the consumerism jokes, or it's just, well, they didn't really have time, which is the thing that I'm pretty much going to hedge my bets on, because it seems like they really wanted to go for it for Deadlocked, if that makes any sense.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the one, the only, Shellshock!
Come on, little furry man. Time to die.
So, this is Shellshock, our Arnold Schwarzenegger giant robot of the now, who, in terms of attack patterns, is actually quite similar to the Terrible 2 from Ratchet & Clank 3, which I don't think I showed off in the commentary, which is a bit of a mistake on my part, but anyway. Live and regret, I suppose. But yeah, basically he'll fire his big fuck-off blaster, he has a few shockwave attacks, and he also launches out a bunch of missiles that also have targeting reticles that you gotta avoid. Not too bad of a first boss fight, actually, although it does also kind of get you in the mindset of just circle around and shoot, in terms of that being your basic strategy, but at the same time, I feel like Shellshock does enough in terms of his attack patterns to at least keep you going, and again, when he does return for a second bout, again, that's when his attacks do increase, so again, in terms of enemy dynamics, I think you're pretty well sorted despite the very basic shoot things shoot back sort of combat scenario. Although, something of a bit of padding on Insomniac's part is that this isn't the last time we're facing off against Shellshock, because, yeah, this is pretty much a multi-stage boss fight where, again, you're going to be fighting Shellshock periodically, but in turn, you're also going to be progressing throughout the level and basically infiltrating the inner sanctum of Kronos. I mean, it's not very interesting, and, well, I mean, I say not very interesting, but I mean, I do like the level. It's just that rather than feeling like you're reaching an objective marker with a goal in mind, it feels more like, well, they're basically pushing the goalposts a bit further away each time you try and get a bit closer. Not necessarily done for the sake of, you know, having anything more significant to do, just rather to pad out the runtime. But, I mean, again, Deadlocked being cut at the seams, and this definitely reeks of padding, because Shellshock himself isn't a very interesting character, you don't learn that much about him, and, well, nor is his history all that interesting. I mean, they say that he did fight on the Obani Moons as a warbot of destruction, but what does that really mean, apart from the planet from Ratchet 3, which was really cool with the moons and stuff, was a war, but whatevers. Again, it's all just flavor text as opposed to anything meaningful, so again, it is part of why I said so many eons ago in the previous parts that Deadlock's core gameplay is basically having its back broken, having to do a lot of the heavy lifting of, you know, where the story and aesthetics otherwise would have taken up, you know, at least some of the share of the load, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it is saved by the fact that, you know, we do have at least rail grinding, which does freshen up the experience a little bit, and we do get to see more of the cityscape. But by proxy, though, again, it is a little bit disappointing that we couldn't have, you know, had at least something slightly more interesting in terms of how we progress throughout the stage. Oh yeah, and when you're on grind rails, the only weapon you can use is pretty much your dual Vipers, which, again, is okay by me. I like these little weapons. And I suppose another thing to also bring up returning from Ratchet & Clank 2 and 3 is also cheat codes, which are unlockable by doing skill points and objectives and whatever. And yeah, in this case, alongside also having a, you know, a mode where you can take off Ratchet's helmet if you really don't like the Dread Zone power armor, yeah, you can also have Ratchet hold his guns gangster style. So, yeah, that's cool. Da-na-na-na-na-na, we have completed a stage. Again. Yeah, but yeah, I suppose it is also apropos to mention that, yeah, we're not completely finished with Kronos in this recording session. We're gonna be finishing off Shellshock in the next part and doing some of the secondary missions, and that'll pretty much be us, so yeah, the part length might be a little bit skewed between very short parts and very, well, average parts as you're seeing here, so it's all kind of swings and roundabouts here, really. And now we need to have more to see while we're just fiddling about with bloody Alpha and Omega mods. But yeah, to kind of reiterate, you can remove and place mods on different weapons depending on what you choose, and as you upgrade them, you get more alpha mods to place on your weapons, so yeah. I mean, potentially, if you wanted to have like an ammo-focused build, a speed-focused build, or, you know, an impact mod which increases the damage output, then, again, you very much can have that happen, so I don't know, I mean, I can see the appeal in Deadlock's modding system, I just think it's, well, again, if you'll pardon the metaphor, I feel like it's a 5-step solution to a 1-step problem. But even then, it's not something that damns the game outright, it's just something that it feels like it's added for arbitrary gameplay's sake as opposed to anything really meaningful. Then again, I might just be saying that purely because of the fact that Ratchet & Clank 3 streamlined the whole thing, so again, it's difficult for me to really place whether or not this is just a personal nitpick of mine or something that damns the game outright, but I'm gonna lean more on nitpick as opposed to, you know, oh my god, Ratchet & Clank has a slightly fiddly modding system, ruined forever. But anyway, with all these buildings bopping about, I do wonder, does anybody actually live here? Again, questions that could be answered, but sadly will not be, because... fuck it, I guess. Yes, sound glitches aplenty. Whoopee, I love silence, and rather than getting the powerful weapon up sound... weapon up? Level up sound. Crikey. Let's see if I have any other pishy trivia that I can mention as well. Long commute to open up the cathedral where we can finally take down Shellshock. Whoopee. Well, it seems I have none, except for, well, I guess maybe one thing I can specifically mention about Merc and Green is, something that is actually also quite noticeable if you relook at early trailers for Ratchet Deadlocked is that Merc and Green initially had legs in earlier builds of the game. And, again, they basically would have, you know, ran around bopping about, and part of the reason they were cut, apart from the fact that, again, they were obstinate, you know, physically hard-coded objects that would have gotten in your way, but yeah, they also had buggy pathfinding AI, which... again, I think it was developer Mike Stout, actually, who had the biggest problem with them. So yeah, they basically cut their legs off, had them become hovering robots, and boom, problem solved. Which I think was a really good idea, on the other hand, because again, it also allowed for them to have, you know, teleport features, which is basically there to sort of, you know, accustom for the whole, wait, how are we going to get these characters from here to there? We'll just have them teleport in, because they're robots. Fuck it, makes sense. They don't get in your way, and does make Merc and Green quite useful. Not really too much more to say apart from this, but anyway. I suppose the other thing to really mention is some of the skill points. I believe with one of the Executioner robots, which is basically the heavy Dread Zone striker with a giant spanner, yeah, if you go wrench to wrench with that, you get a skill point. Whoopee. Dun 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 dun, the music cut out because of a glitch, because of Insomniac's rushed game development cycle. Dun 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 dun. Wow, this actually... oh no, I'm just thinking actually that this does actually take me back to a time because, again, I was just sort of thinking that I wonder why they didn't patch it out, but then I remember, oh yeah, this was the PlayStation 2 era where you couldn't patch your games. You either had to release a finished game, or, well, yeah, otherwise you're pretty much fucked in this case. It is actually a bit of a shame because, well, not really a bit of a shame. What am I talking about? Because, I mean, again, it's good that you can patch out glitches nowadays, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of that mentality has led to a lot of developers being flat out lazy in terms of, you know, just, fuck it, we'll release broken shit and people will buy it, because, I don't know, psychology tricks and the grind, you love seeing that number go up. Fucking sheep. That might be a bit more of a cynical view than a lot of people are willing to, you know, understand it again. I don't usually like getting on my soapbox regarding the games industry all that much, but at the same time, I don't feel like releasing glitchy and broken games should ever really be a thing. Yeah, but nevertheless, it's, I don't know, just the world we live in, I guess. Clank. Clank. Clank! Dun 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 dun. But yeah, I believe a lot of these issues should be fixed as soon as we're done with Kronos, but, yeah, we just kinda gotta weather the storm. I wanna say it also might be a disc issue, because, well, I mean, bear in mind, I have owned this game since 2005, and I would say, up until about 2009, really, I wasn't exactly the best at taking care of my discs, which is, a bit to my shame, to be perfectly honest, because, again, actually, I remember actually looking at some photos of me when I was a kid just recently, and, oh boy, I remember seeing a shot of my old bedroom and seeing some of the discs lying like flat on the fucking dust-covered bedside table, and Jesus Christ, that damn near gave my future self a heart attack. Well, future self, that is to say, the present me, that was the future me of the past, that is to say, in the present. Now I taste purple because my brain is bleeding. I suppose to comment on the rail grinding, at least in regards to Ratchet and Clank, it's a mode that I'm simultaneously glad and sort of kind of banal by, because again, on this extent, like I mean, again, when you jump on the rail in Ratchet and Clank games, even from game one, again, you're locked onto that rail and you can flip to and fro by pressing the X button and jumping to the left or right. So again, you don't get any Sonic Adventure 2 or Sonic Heroes style, you know, you fiddle with the analog stick too much and then you end up getting flung off in the opposite direction. At the same time though, like, I mean, again, for a lot of people that complain about automated gameplay or taking gameplay away from you, what are you really doing besides just occasionally jumping and shooting? Not much. And again, you could just say that it's meant to be a reprieve and that's all that it is, and I can somewhat accept that, but at the same time though, like, I mean, a lot of people that cried foul at Ratchet 3 for removing this game mode, I think is the risk of being haughty and derisive. I mean, raised eyebrow, really? Oh yes, I'm being judgy and judgmental. You can't see my facial expression right now, but you know what haughty, derisive tone I'm taking with you. Harumph. Anyway, I mean, silliness aside though, like, I mean, it is what it is, but I mean, at the same time, I also don't think it was a damning flaw. I mean, again, as I mentioned in the Ratchet 3 review, again, I wouldn't fault people for missing it, but at the same time, it's not what you're here for. I mean, to be honest, it's kind of like getting mad at Final Fantasy VIII for not including triple triads or whatever. I mean, it's fun, but whatever. And I guess one last passing remark before we, end this part completely is that, yeah, aiming can be a little bit of a bitch because, again, you're moving at a set speed and, yeah, things can blow by a little bit fast. But anyway, I'm done padding, so on that note, I am Solidus-Skully, keep it new metal, and next time on the Ratchet Deadlocked commentary, we're gonna take down Shellshock for good. Catch you next time.